Thank you for those good questions and for your engagement and support on the creation of the Special Envoy. Special Envoy, let's talk through what we hope doesn't happen. Several members have raised the pending crisis in El Fasher. Just talk about what sort of planning is being done in the event there really is a full-scale assault by the RSF and a humanitarian crisis that's even worse than now in terms of protecting civilians. What planning's happening? What do you think you would most need from us? What could we do?
Senator, I sadly don't think I have a great answer to that question. We have obviously are very focused on preventing it from happening and looking at all deterrence power that we have to prevent that from happening. I think that the indications are that the various aid groups from WFP, UNICEF, et cetera, are trying to be prepared for what an influx would look like in Chad. Of course, there's a presidential election going on there, and there's some spillover effects, not just humanitarian-wise, but in terms of some of the ethnic flows. But we have not, I think, one of the biggest differences in my experience in Darfur 20 years ago or so and now is, there was much more discussion of civilian protection mechanisms at that point, of peacekeeping forces, whether AU or UN. We don't currently have things in a position that I think would be able to stand up rapidly in that context. I know US-UN has been raising these questions actively with the UN. I've raised this with the African Union in terms of possibilities, and we will, I think, be actually doing some conversations on that later today. But I think it's a very fair question to ask. It's a good reason to make sure it doesn't happen, that we have the fall, but continuing to look at how we can prepare better for that scenario.
What are we doing to document atrocities, to not just try and prevent human rights violations, but to document the atrocities that are being committed and to begin to deliver accountability? There was discussions earlier about imposing sanctions on specific individuals. In the absence of any effective and real accountability mechanism, the deterrence for military leaders across the country from a range of backgrounds to stop blocking humanitarian access and to stop carrying out atrocities. There's not much of a deterrent effect. I'd be interested in what you think we're doing and what other actors can or should be doing to strengthen the deterrence of ongoing atrocities.
So I think the United States deserves a great deal of credit, thanks to the budget you all have approved, for supporting over 100 different civil society organizations. That's probably underguessing the number, that have been doing everything from emergency relief to deterrence and accountability, including documentation. As you can imagine, we were required to have quite a bit of evidence to move forward with OFAC sanctions in the way that we've done. We've also seen groups like Raoul Wallenberg and others document abuses and draw from both international NGO and Sudanese efforts, often produced with great courage. I think there is an effort to ensure, as in past cases, that we can document as much as we can. We also know that because of the telecom blackouts and because of just rampant harassment, abuse, and detention of civil society actors, that we have not always gotten a complete record. One of the things that, to me, captures just how invisible and horrific this war is that we don't have a credible death count. We literally don't know how many people have died, possibly to a factor of 10 or 15. The number was mentioned earlier, 15 to 30,000. Some think it's at 150,000. We are now supporting a couple of efforts to use methodologies to document and get to that, so we at least know what kind of consequences we're looking at here. Some of that has been, again, people operating under extremely difficult situations, and that's why I think it's important that the United States, probably more than any other country, has been supporting civil society efforts in a variety of ways. That includes aid delivery, but it also includes issues of local reconciliation efforts that are ongoing. I mean, one of the things that we know is likely if we are to get a breakthrough on peace is people returning to homes that are destroyed and possibly knowing the person that destroyed it living in the same community. And I think these civil society groups have shown tremendous creativity in Sudan over the past few years and how we think about those kinds of reconciliation efforts in addition to accountability. But we will continue to support efforts to collect that documentation.
Senator Van Hollen referenced the trip that he and I took to the UAE, to Kenya, and to Sudan, to Khartoum back in 2021. It was a very hopeful time. There was steady progress. I've done my best to support Sudan's peaceful revolution and most importantly, the grassroots pro-democracy organizations, the resistance committees, the women's organizations that you've referenced. Some actors have criticized the negotiation process as really just focusing on two military leaders and two militaries and not emphasizing the importance of returning to the pathway towards democracy and the civilian-led pathway towards democracy that was so hard-fought and hard-won. You seem clear on this. What more could we be doing? You can tell there's an interested and engaged Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We've had active participation here on a bipartisan basis from a majority of the committee members. What more could we be doing to support and strengthen your ability and the ability of the United States to engage with actors beyond just these two military leaders to try and ensure that we get back to that path towards civilian-led democracy in Sudan?
Thank you, Senator. I think that any effort to show that this committee is hearing from and centering the voices of the Sudanese people in the way that you've done in your statements and in your speeches, showing that unity of the Sudanese people, not allowing bad actors to claim disingenuously divisions. Again, not that there aren't political divisions, but that those are not divisions about the core questions about the future of Sudan is important. I think we would like to see more countries join us in the sanctions effort and other punitive measures for bad actors, and that includes our multilateral partners as well. I think that interest is growing. One of my reasons for hope is that in addition to the advocacy you all have done to elevate this in the administration, we've seen the appointment of a UN envoy. We've seen the high panel on Sudan become more active, and I again met with the three of them yesterday-ish. And it's an incredibly serious and powerful group of people who have a lot of experience, I think, that can be brought to bear here. So we'll continue to try to build that. But I think this just goes back to something I want to emphasize in terms of what the strategy is, which is we really do have two generals who could end the war tomorrow if they had the courage. They don't. And so the issue is pretty simple. How do we create enough political and diplomatic pressure to compel a deal? And I think that is where we can continue to work together on what raises the cost of pursuing that war on the one hand, and how do we ensure what that peace looks like. And again, because of the reasons you've said, I think the goal is sequencing this in a way that says we don't need to solve every part of Sudan's problems and challenges. That's up to the Sudanese people to do. And rushing those things into these negotiations doesn't do a service to them or to those questions. We need to reach the limited number of questions that are necessary to end the war and begin restart that civilian transition. Again, that wasn't perfect the first time, but learning the lessons from the last time.
But if I may, weapons and ammunition continue to flow into Sudan. This is a country of 50 million people. Somehow, from a variety of ways, by air, over land, the means of fighting and continuing fighting keep flowing in. They're not being manufactured in Sudan. They're being supplied by outside actors. Humanitarian relief needs to flow into Sudan at a much higher level. By my count, we spent $920 million in fiscal year 23 in supporting Sudanese refugees outside of Sudan and in trying to provide humanitarian relief inside Sudan. We're going to need to provide much more than that this year. I am so relieved and grateful that the $9 billion in humanitarian aid was a part of the package that ultimately passed the House and the Senate. But if we can't deliver accountability to outside actors and to inside actors that are both flowing weapons in and not delivering humanitarian aid, we're not going to be able to bring an end to this. What's the most important targeted thing we could be doing to raise the costs of blocking humanitarian aid delivery and of continuing to provide arms in violation of the UN arms embargo?
Let me actually say a quick word on the aid side, and then I'll go to the arms embargo question, which is, as you know, that money was not earmarked because of the nature of how it went through, or not for Sudan. I think it is very helpful for the implementing partners to understand how much Sudan is a priority and that speed is of the essence. We have had good pledges from our partners in Paris. We'd really been carrying the bulk of the burden ourselves. And even within our own system, it's one thing to pledge that money. It's another to be seeing food and medicine arrive, in addition to the access and blockage issues. So I think reinforcing both that we expect that to translate into real results on the ground and to do so quickly is very important. The arms embargo, I want to go back to something Senator Risch said, which is, I think he was quoting either the UN expert panel or SG, that it's illegal, it's immoral, and it must stop. That is existing law and mandate under the existing arms embargo. It is certainly something where we are communicating the consequences of violating that. This is something we've talked to the African Union and the high-level panel on. This is, again, something that affects many of their member states in this conversation. And we've seen some very strong statements from a number of the African leaders about the importance of enforcing this embargo and ensuring consequences for that. So we do think that that is something that is very important. And as I said in my earlier statement, there is no one who can claim ignorance here about what the RSF's modus operandi is, what it's been historically and what it is right now. That is well documented in the public realm in terms of what you are doing if you are sending arms to that particular group. And with SAF, I think the key message right now is about humanitarian access and need to respect international humanitarian law.
I introduced the Sudan Democracy Act in 2021 just to highlight the urgency of holding military leaders accountable for impeding the transition to democracy. I'm working to reintroduce a similar piece of legislation in this Congress, and I'm hopeful that it's complementary to your efforts. What would you most need or expect in legislation that strengthens the urgency of imposing accountability?
So I think that the Congress across both parties and both houses has been extremely clear about their desire for consequences for those that are committing atrocities and those that are enabling it. And I think that message has been heard in the region and will continue to be heard. I think the Sudanese people have felt in many times in this war rendered invisible. So even ensuring the funding for civil society, the funding for humanitarian aid, having a hearing like this, perhaps a subsequent one with Sudanese diaspora and civil society members, all can do that. But the key here is to show, I think, the most important thing, and I understand why some people doubt this, which is we don't have the luxury of not having hope, of not believing this problem can be solved. When we say that it can't be solved, it's enabling those that are continuing it. This thing could be solved tomorrow if the political will were there of the key actors inside and outside. And we must be clear that we do not accept the idea of this war continuing, and we are going to build the political will across the region to compel it to be over, and that the Senate stands in partnership with ensuring that through both raising the costs and being prepared to commit to a peaceful and democratic Sudan that will take years of partnership to build.
Thank you. That's very well put. A nation of 50 million where there are millions and millions of internally displaced people and refugees, 5 million on the very door of famine, and where it resembles the worst conflicts I've seen in my time in public service, the DRC, Libya, Yemen, the pernicious impact of outside actors, the failure of attention by the international community, the absolutely critical role the United States is playing, and the need for regional actors to engage and engage forcefully. I look forward to working with you on this, Special Envoy. I appreciate your leadership. I'm going to invite Senator Booker to now join this hearing and out of the experience he recently had with you in traveling to the camps in Chad. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Senator.